Hey guys, it's Mr. Francy here, and it is time to review chapters 6 to 10 of Personal Demons. Now, this review does contain spoilers, as all of my reviews do. If you would like to see an overview that does not contain spoilers, please go and check out my reading vlogs, because my reading vlogs are just an overview. They don't contain spoilers, but for the review section, I really do want to get into all the nitty-gritty things that I like, don't like, that kind of stuff, and I really can't do that without spoiling the book. So the review sections are all about spoilers. I'm going to tell you everything, everything that I want to discuss anyway, but if you want an overview, just go ahead and look at the reading vlog. Last time we discussed this book, I discussed chapters 1 to 5, and I said, if I read the word electricity one more time, I have since read the word electricity 10 more times between chapters 5 to 10. Is it still a romance novel? Yes. You know that saying, wolf in sheep's clothing? It's practically this book. It is a romance book in a fantasy cover clothing. I mean, taking one look at this title, you would go, oh my gosh, Personal Demons, okay, angel, demon, okay, this is going to be really interesting, and no. And unless Lisa Desrochers is one of those writers that is just an incredibly slow-paced writer, which is just, you may love that kind of thing, I don't. I want to run with my characters from the moment anything big happens. I already discussed this when I was talking about the first book in the first series that I wrote. The very first word I used was fireball, because my characters, who were witches, were battling demons right in the very first paragraph of the first novel. So I don't like the idea of having a very slow pace, nor do I like the idea that with the blurb you are setting readers up to think that this is a fantasy novel, and then you are shrouding it in romance for the first 10 chapters. And that is basically my quick little overview before I get into more greater detail on this. The first 5 chapters were about romance, the next 5 are also about romance, and I'm kind of getting the feeling that Lisa Desrochers is probably one of those writers that will take forever and a day. This is just my words, my view. You guys might think of it differently, and that's totally fine. But take forever and a day to lay the foundation, and then we'll leave the last 2, 3, maybe even 4, if you're lucky, chapters for where the main big thing is going to happen. And I'm not enjoying this. I am reading this book as part of my book club. And I did say this in my reading vlog, but I'm going to say it here again because it is worth mentioning. With my goal setting for 2020, goal number 5 was to DNF any books that I don't enjoy. However, I have now amended that goal twofold. One, I said I was going to give them up until at least a quarter of the way through the book. I've now changed that and said I'm going to give it till halfway through the book, which sometimes it's going to be really tough for Mr. Francy, but that's okay. I will give them a chance. And maybe if I've learned anything, it's that you start a book from halfway through. But anyway, I mean, with this book, I wouldn't have minded if I had seen a review on the first 10 chapters and started from chapter 11 onwards. Really, I would have been totally fine with that. But anyway, my second sidebar to that rule is that if the book I'm reading is a book I'm reading for book club, then I will read it all the way through, because I feel that I owe it to whoever's in the book club to finish the book. This is a book I'm reading for book club. I'm not a fan of this book, but I will read it all the way through because it's a book I'm reading for book club. So I will honor that commitment that I made, and I will get through this book no matter how much it continues to annoy me. But anyway, let's move on and discuss it chapter by chapter, beginning with chapter 6. Okay, so chapter 6 is all about Luke going to Franny's house to, I guess, study with her, but he obviously has other intentions. And it's kind of, I don't know. See, this is where the book really annoys me because, I don't know. Why can't he grab her, like physically grab her and take her to hell? Like, I mean, I get that that's not the point of the book, but if I was writing the book in chapter 10, it would have happened. I would have had Luke grab her and take her to hell, and then bring her back, and then I would have had Gabe grab her and take her to heaven, and then bring her back, and see, at least we would have had those fantastical moments, but no, as a dear friend of mine would say, but no. Not according to Lisa DeRoches. So, Luke goes over to her house apparently to study, but obviously he is there to try and win her soul, claim her soul is the terminology they're using. So, claim her soul, and well, it doesn't really go down the way that he thinks it is going to go down. I guess that's a little tiny bit of a plot twist, but still, it just made it even more boring for me. But anyway, so he gets there and he is convinced that he's going to be able to charm over everyone in the household. He does manage to, when he gets to the household, he knocks on the door. Franny's dad answers the door, and Franny's dad does not like him from the get-go. He tries to do a lot of different things, Luke does, by using his powers to try and convince the dad that, you know, he's a great guy and all this, and his powers don't seem to be working on the dad. I don't like this. I'm sure there's a reason why his powers aren't working on the dad, but I would have had a lot more fun, considering it's meant to be a fantasy novel, if his powers did work, to see the effect that they would have had on the dad. But anyway, Lisa DeRoches wants to go in another direction, and that's totally fine. So anyway, Franny comes downstairs and she, takes him into the house. They go into the living area where two of Franny's sisters are. I think she has like 5 sisters or something. But 2 of them are in there. One is playing Scrabble by herself, which is totally fine. That's what she's doing. Another one is reading a book. The TV is on, but she's reading a book. But the moment that she sees Luke, she's fascinated by how charming he looks. Sorry, just going to move a message out the way, guys. She's fascinated by how charming he looks, and then he goes over to the other one who's playing Scrabble and advises her that if she uses the word she wants to use, that is fine, but if she adds a couple of other letters, then she will earn more points. Excuse me. And he's also using his powers while he's doing that, and that works on her, and so both of the sisters do like him a lot, which is great, bless them. But I don't see how that really helps his case because the dad doesn't like him. I'm just going to pause. I'll be right back. So Luke goes upstairs with Franny. Well, yeah, he goes to go upstairs with Franny, but then I think the dad or the mum, one of them, says that they need to study in the kitchen, which Franny thinks is weird because she's had study dates over before, both boys and girls, and her parents have never said you have to go in this kitchen, so it's a big deal. I mean, for me, not really. It's just more annoying to me that we're not getting anywhere in the book, but, this is what happened in the chapter, so this is what we need to talk about. So they go in the kitchen, they study, and the dad keeps watching them like a hawk, basically. Luke basically takes a question that Franny asks him about what they're studying and says, "What do you think, Mr. whatever Franny's surname is? What do you think?" And he looks like a deer in the headlights and runs away, the dad. Eventually, she takes him up to her room and puts on some music, but her mum calls her out of the room and says, "Why is he in your room? I thought we had an understanding," to which Franny thinks, "Well, no, we never had an understanding because you never told me that we weren't allowed to go in my room." And so it becomes like this little teenage situation that I'm sorry for the angst, but I'm just really not enjoying this. And that's basically it. He then leaves and Franny then demands to know what their problem is, and they say they don't like the vibe that's coming off of him, and that is the end of chapter 6. So I found the chapter to be way too lovey-dovey, not enough of Luke trying to win Franny's soul, and I gave chapter 6 a 1 out of 10. Let's move on to chapter 7. So after the disappointment of chapter 6, I moved on to chapter 7. Well, every time I start a chapter, I'm just hoping and praying that we're actually going to get a fantastic, cool chapter. But what ends up happening instead is that the family are on the way to church, and when they get to the church car parking lot, Franny sees the car that we've alluded to in a previous chapter that she was working on with her grandpa is now ready. He had driven it to the church parking lot, and they're going to drive it home together at the end of the service. And that's basically what happens. They drive the car home. She's really excited because she's fixed up this car with her grandpa, and that's it. They get home, they have a bit of a conversation, and the only interesting thing, which to me just proves the point of how slow Lisa DeRoche's is in laying this foundation, is that Franny asks her grandpa if the devil was to ever drive a car, what kind of car would he drive? Excuse me. And Grandpa says to her it would be a black Shelby Cobra GT500 year 1967. So this is Luke's model, not the year, but it's extremely close. Now, okay, I appreciate why the author's putting that in there because it's like a clue that he is a demon. But couldn't this have been done in like chapter 1? Why is it being done in chapter 7? Anyway, so Franny ends up going home, and her sister Grace gives her, or wants to talk to her about the Bible. Grace knows that Franny doesn't read the Bible, but she defers to Peter 5:8, which is, be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, walks around like a prowling lion looking for someone to devour. She's making this point about Luke. She doesn't trust Luke. And basically, Franny tells Grace to leave her room, and that is it. That is the entirety of chapter 7, and, well, my rating, I didn't enjoy it, as I now have the feeling that I know how DeRoches is going about writing this book. Keywords, romance, and, sorry, just a moment, just lost my spot. Keywords, romance, and subtlety. If it were the opposite, no romance and always obvious, I would be enjoying it so much more. So yeah, it's literally the entire first 7 chapters are all about love and romance. And yes, there are these little moments of Luke and Gabe trying to win her, and Franny, little moments of Franny realizing that Luke is there's more to Luke than meets the eye, there's more to Gabe than meets the eye. Luke is devil-ish, Gabe is angel-ish, but it is so minute that, if anything, it is just so much more annoying how minute it is. It's almost like DeRoches is writing this book as a mystery, but we already know the answer, and that is incredibly annoying. It's I will reference Pretty Little Liars here, and if you have not seen Pretty Little Liars and you don't want any spoilers, then, well, I'm sorry, but this is filled with spoilers. But Pretty Little Liars is a show, but it started off as a book series about this cyber stalking bully, and who is anonymous, and we're trying to work out, all the main characters are trying to work out who this cyber stalking bully, who refers to themselves as A, is. And so we spend the entirety of however long it takes, really, in the show. It's the first couple of seasons, trying to work out who A is, but we don't know who A is, and that makes it even more exciting. Every single thing you see, everything you hear, everything you read, it is a clue, and it makes sense because we don't know who A is. Had Pretty Little Liars started off with A is, and I won't give it away because it's really well done, especially the first reveal of A is really well done, so I'm not going to say who it is. But if they started it off with the first couple of chapters in the book or the first episode of the show saying A is this, Now we're going to give you clues. You can see how it's annoying. We already know that Luke is a demon. We already know that Gabe is an angel. Whether you read it in the blurb or whether you're reading it in the book, we already know that they are. So the fact that Derosius is trying to point out all these clues to show us that they are is completely redundant. So I don't appreciate that she's doing that. So anyway, I ended up giving this chapter a 1 out of 10 because I just found it to be a completely boring chapter. All right, let's move on to chapter 8. All right, so chapter 8, be ready, be warned, because there are some, very little, some fantastical moments in chapter 8. And so I appreciate that Lisa DeRoches has finally added some fantastical elements into this book. It's only taken 8 chapters. More on that with a discussion with me between myself and Lisa DeRoches if ever we get the chance to have a talk about this. So basically, Luke now is upping the ante because he really wants to claim Franny's soul. Which my first question to this is, why didn't he want to do this straight away in chapter 6 when in the end of chapter 5, or towards the end of chapter 5, he's talking to his boss, King Lucifer, who is telling him if you get her soul, you will then become the head boss in acquisitions and all this stuff. Why didn't we continue this in chapter 6? Why are we waiting 2 more chapters to get to a point where finally you're like, okay, how do I do this? Really? Why do we need the filler? I'm sorry, I'm not a filler person. Whether it comes to books, shows, films, I'm not about filler. I never have been. I find them a waste of time. As a friend of my mother's and a wonderful editor once told me, because I love writing, if it doesn't relate to the story, if it doesn't matter, don't put it in. Now, I'm not saying that the romance in this book doesn't matter, because it could be she ends up with one of them and they end up being romantically involved. And if that's the case, then it does relate to the book. But what would upset me about that is that this book is not a book about an angel and a devil trying to win the soul of a human. This book is about an angel and a devil and a human who loves both of them, who just so happened to be trying to claim her soul, which is a very different story. And had the blurb been written that way, I would not have picked up this book, because it's a romance book that just happens to have a little bit of fantasy in it. That's my assessment of what I'm reading so far. But anyway, in chapter 8, Luke is going for another strategy, shall we call it trying to get every other girl in order to make Franny jealous. It seems to be working. When he is with Angelique, Franny is most definitely jealous, and Luke senses this with his smelling powers. They end up in English class, and Luke tries to find ways to indirectly ask how what he did affected her, but Franny is giving nothing away. Once she sees Gabe, however, things seem to be going well for her, which Luke is so upset with that he goes from walking with Angelique, but Angelique is probably how you should pronounce it, to switching to Cassidy, all because Cassidy is going in the same direction as Gabe and Franny. And see, this is my point. Yes, he needs to see how what he is doing is affecting her, but he is not following her because he wants to see how it's affecting her. He is following her because he loves her, and I don't like this. Yes, love conquers all, but can we leave that for romance stories? As a dear booktuber that I love and follow constantly, I'm basically watching her stuff every day, likes to say sometimes it is okay for there to be no romance or for no one to end up together. It's totally fine. And I completely agree with that, because why are we doing this? Like, seriously, shouldn't he be taking this time to plot and plan what his next move is? Or shouldn't he be taking this time to follow them to see what Gabe is doing and not to see if she's falling in love with Gabe? Okay, anyway, just my opinion. The science class for Gabe and Franny seems to go well. It's clear she likes him, and she spends most of the class fantasizing about him. True, boring, but true. After Gabe leaves, Luke starts walking towards her, so Franny dodges him as best she can, only to wind up near Ryan, her ex who still loves her, and they have a chat about her coming back to the band to see the new singer that they have. Eventually, she ends up saying no because she doesn't want Ryan to be led on by her in any way. Cut to the cafeteria where everyone, including Luke and Gabe, are having lunch together. Gabe asks Franny if she wants to study with him that night. Franny tells him she has to go to judo first, but is happy to study afterwards. My problem with this is that we have like every second chapter, and spoiler alert for where we're going, every second chapter someone has to go on a study date with Franny. I don't like this. I think this is just ridiculous. Why can't we call a spade? Because we all know that they're not there to study. Even if this wasn't a fantasy book, it would be teenage humans with their hormones, okay? And yet we're talking about going to her place to study, and it sounds like they mean it. It sounds like Gabe really wants to study science and Luke really wants to work on the English assignment. But that's not why we're there, and so why do we keep calling it a study day? And it is so teen, and if I came into this knowing it was a teenage book, I probably would have looked at it differently, but I don't want to read a teenage book. But anyway, it's fine. It is what it is. So Gabe asks Franny if she wants to study with him that night. Franny tells him she has judo first, but is happy to study afterwards. Luke has decided to up the ante and try to get Franny to commit 3 sins: lust, envy, and wrath. This is where finally I'm like, oh my god, Lisa DeRoches, where have you been? Hello and welcome. We're finally doing something here. So Luke is, as I've already said in the chapters 1 to 5 review, there are 2 sets of views. So it's a multi-view book, this one. The views of Franny and the views of Luke. I love reading Luke's side of the book. I do. And it is just, as much as the book as a whole is boring, I said this with chapters 1 to 5 as well, if we cut out all of Franny's part, I probably would love this book. So I always look forward to seeing any time Luke's name comes up as a heading, because I know I'm going to read about his side of things, which is a lot more fantastical than Franny's side of things. However, in one of the chapters, it's just a Franny chapter, and that really let me down. But anyway, so we're getting from Luke's side of things how he wants to get her to commit a couple of sins, because if she commits sins, then they can claim her. And this is what I love. We're really going into the plan of, okay, how do we actually get her? Let's stick to, what we're trying to do here, not fall in love. Let's actually try and claim her soul. So thank you, Lisa DeRoches. We're finally there. So according to the law of this universe, the devil cannot claim, or King Lucifer, the devil, cannot claim the soul of a human if they only commit one deadly sin. So, okay, that's fine. But don't know what the case is here in actual human land here. But in this universe, one deadly sin is not enough. It needs to be more than one for the soul to be claimed. I think they're trying to make the point that if you commit one deadly sin, then you can seek penance and, forgiveness and all this stuff, and you can get better from that. But if you commit 2 deadly sins, then that's taking it too far. It's like, oh my god, you've gone too far. So anyway, stay back, demon. But anyway, apparently. So he decides to go for 3 just to be on the safe side. And I really appreciate how he's discussing that specifically he wants to try and get her to commit the 3 sins of lust, envy, and wrath. He figures if he can do that, then he'll be able to tag her soul for hell. So phase 1 is him asking Taylor the Nailer to the movies that night. Because if he gets her to go and Franny doesn't go, well, if she says yes, Franny can start being envious. So there we go. There's envy. Excuse me. Now, Shiley Riley suggests that they make it a group thing and invites Franny. Bless Shiley Riley, she's trying here. But Franny says no. So Franny's not going. Luke then realizes how dangerous it could be for Gabe to hang out with Franny that night, as he could end up tagging her soul for heaven. I appreciate that. Lisa DeRoches, if you are watching this, I appreciate that that Luke realizes how dangerous it could be for Gabe to hang out with Franny, as he could end up tagging her soul for heaven, not because he might wind up being her boyfriend. So thank you. Yes, we're finally getting somewhere with this. Okay, so let's keep going. How did I find it? Most of the chapter was boring, but Luke and his new phases on how to get Franny were very interesting. I hope the Doroshas can up the ante with the whole tagging thing, because at the moment, feelings are still being explored. Which, in chapter 8, why are feelings still being explored if it's not a romance novel? I gave it 5 out of 10 only because of Luke's plan to get Franny through lust, envy, and wrath. I really did appreciate that. Alright, let's move on to chapter 9. So, chapter 9, Gabe comes over and, well, he gets the total opposite treatment to Luke. Everyone, including Mum and Dad, love Gabe. And, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm kind of on Luke's side of this battle, I think, because, everything I've read so far, I have a place in my heart for Luke. And here comes Gabe, this angel boy, and everyone just loves him. And he's allowed to go into Franny's room. He's allowed to go anywhere he wants with her. He even stays for dinner and everyone has a nice conversation with him. He puts it on so thickly around her parents. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I love this meal. You're a very good cook. Oh my gosh. He goes too far. Where if Luke had been in that situation, it would have been interesting to see because he's a demon. But also you feel like the dad might turn around and say something snarky back at him. So I just don't like that the family like Gabe. I get what Doroshas is doing. If I'm to zoom out, look at the bigger picture of what Doroshas is writing here, I get it, I do. But as a reader trying to get involved in the plot and not what she's doing as a writer, I just don't like it. So anyway, they end up going up to Franny's room, Franny and Gabe. Franny's playing this music and it's the song that comes on is a song about questioning God for all the bad things that God does with the world. Now, as we know from a previous chapter, Gabe is all about God, and well, we know why, because he's the angel. So, he's all about God. And Franny knows this because of a previous discussion that they've had before about do you believe in God? Anyway, so Gabe starts on this whole tirade about how wonderful God is. I'm not going to spend too much time about this, but I do appreciate that he's trying to tag her this way. It's just it's extremely subtle. There is no perspective from Gabe's point. There is no moment of Gabe's point of view in this entire book. It would have been a lot more appropriate to see Gabe's perspective here rather than to read the perspective of Franny while Gabe is doing this. So I don't like that, Lisa Doroshas. I really think you should have included Gabe's perspective there. But anyway, it is what it is. And yeah. So eventually Franny starts crying because Gabe says something like, people die, that's just the way that it is. And she's crying over her brother Matt. She cries into his chest, and while she's doing that, she's having all these feelings for Gabe, which again, it's just like, oh my God, seriously. I mean, just one word, electricity. I'm done with that word. I am. Doroshas, find another word. I mean, at least if she found other words, it would be a much more interesting read. But to read electricity every 2-3 pages, I'm over it. I was over it in the first 5 chapters. I'm definitely over it in the second 5. Let's cut now to Luke. Luke is with Taylor the Nailer and Shiley Riley, and they've seen the movie and they're eating a meal afterwards, I suppose. And Shiley Riley is taking the stance of doing everything that she can to back up Franny, while Taylor the Nailer is doing everything she can to prove to Luke why he is not Franny's type. Luke is trying to move this along because he's completely bored out of his mind, which I really appreciate. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love Luke. Like, I don't want to deal with this scene. So what he wants to do is drop Shiley Riley off and then go somewhere with Taylor the Nailer because sorry about the lighting there. Because he figures that if he goes off and does something with Taylor the Nailer, then that would make Franny even more envious of what's going on with them. So they end up dropping Shiley Riley off, and he and Taylor the Nailer start talking. Taylor the Nailer starts to get a little bit, intimate, shall we say, with Luke, but Luke very quickly puts an end to this because he has all these thoughts and feelings like, stop, I can't do this, I love Franny, which, anyway, you had a plan, and according to Keith from American Survivor, I'm gonna use his quote, I say stick to the plan. And I agree. Stick to the plan. Come on. Anyway, because he's a demon. It's not like he's human. He's a demon. So why is he not sticking to the plan? Because he has feelings for Franny. I'm just not a fan of this. Okay, so then Luke drops Taylor the Nailer off at home, and then he decides he's going to go over to Franny's because he's so worried now, and this is what I don't like. He's worried twofold. Yes, he's worried that Gabe is going to tag her soul for heaven, but he's also worried that Gabe is going to take her as his girlfriend, and he doesn't want that. I wish that side wasn't included. Anyway, he goes to the house, the car is there, and we now learn about another power that he has, which is the power to phase in and out of things. I believe it's called phase. Yes, phase into places. So basically what that means, the way I'm seeing it, is that you can go from one place to another. So if we want to look at Charmed, for example, we would call this orbing. You might call it transporting. Whatever. Going from one place to another in the blink of an eye. We call it phasing, apparently, in this world. So he can phase. He tries to phase into Franny's room to see what's going on with them, knowing full well that Gabe will be able to see him, but that Franny will not be able to see him. But for some reason, he's unable to phase into her house. I'm very intrigued by this. I'm wondering why this is the case. Gabe ends up deciding to leave quite suddenly. It's not explained why, but I figure the reason he's leaving is because he knows that Luke is there trying to phase in. He leaves, he tells Franny to lock the doors just to be safe. She laughs it off, but he says, no, I'm being serious, and make sure you lock the door because there's a demon out there that you don't know about that's trying to kill you. But, well, not trying to kill you, but trying to claim your soul, and I don't want that to happen. So anyway, that's kind of how the chapter ends. Then Franny believes she sees Matt, her brother's soul, ghostly form, soul, and so she writes in the journal about having seen him. Honestly, it was better than the last couple of chapters because there was a lot more fantastical elements and sticking to the plan. Thank you, Keith, once again. I say stick to the plan. So I appreciated that, and I gave it a 7 out of 10 because all in all, it was a really good chapter. Let's move on to chapter 10. So chapter 10 is a really short chapter. We only have Franny's perspective in it, and I don't like that. But she comes to school, and Gabe asks her if she's okay. She lies and says she is. I don't know why she's not, other than the fact that she might have seen Matt's soul. But anyway, I'm confused with a lot of this book. And then Luke asks Franny if they can have a study date. I mean, can you see a theme coming here? But obviously they talk about the fact that Luke isn't really generally accepted in her home, so they're going to go to his home, which I really do appreciate. That is very exciting. Just a moment. So Franny has it out finally with Luke in this chapter about all the feelings she's had, and she's like, are you dating anyone else? Blah, 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 blah. He says, I've only dated one person, you. She goes, wait, hang on, what do you mean? And he says, well, the coffee date, remember? And she goes, oh, yeah, right, the coffee date. So, I mean, that's basically that argument. Then they go into the cafeteria. Franny confronts Taylor the Nailer if anything happened. Taylor the Nailer says, yes, I tried. He rejected me. And then Franny, for some reason, walks back over to the table where Gabe and Luke are at and says in front of everyone, we want this to be a girls' table again, so you guys have to go. This was a shock to me and to Taylor the Nailer and to Charlie Riley because it came from absolutely out of nowhere.